are going to start on chapter 10, section 4, the end of sickness. So I will go ahead and share my screen and start reading. And then after I am done reading, you'll have a chance to discuss. All right, chapter 10, section 4, the end of sickness. All magic is an attempt at reconciling the irreconcilable. All religion is the recognition that the irreconcilable cannot be reconciled. Sickness and perfection are irreconcilable. If God created you perfect, you are perfect. If you believe you can be sick, you have placed other gods before him. God is not at war with the God of sickness you made, but you are. He is the symbol of deciding against God. And you are afraid of him because you cannot be reconciled with God's will. If you attack him, you will make him real to you. But if you refuse to worship him in whatever form he may appear to you, and wherever you think you see him, he will disappear into the nothingness out of which he was made. Reality can dawn only on an unclouded mind. It is always there to be accepted, but its acceptance depends on your willingness to have it. To know reality must involve the willingness to judge unreality for what it is. To overlook nothingness is merely to judge it correctly. And because of your ability to evaluate it truly, to let it go. Knowledge cannot dawn on a mind full of illusions because truth and illusions are irreconcilable. Truth is whole and cannot be known by part of a mind. The sonship cannot be perceived as partly sick because to perceive it that way is not to perceive it at all. The sonship is one. It is one in all respects. Oneness cannot be divided. If you perceive other gods, your mind is split, and you will not be able to limit the split because it is a sign that you have removed part of your mind from God's will. This means it is out of control. To be out of control is to be out of reason, and then the mind does become unreasonable. By defining the mind wrongly, you perceive it as functioning wrongly. God's laws will keep your mind at peace because peace is his will, and his laws are established to uphold it. His are the laws of freedom, but yours are the laws of bondage. Since freedom and bondage are irreconcilable, their laws cannot be understood together. The laws of God work only for your good, and there are no other laws beside his. Everything else is merely lawless and therefore chaotic. Yet God himself has protected everything he created by his laws. Everything that is not under them does not exist. Laws of chaos is a meaningless term. Creation is perfectly lawful, and the chaotic is without meaning because it is without God. You have given your peace to the gods you made, but they are not there to take it from you, and you cannot give it to them. You are not free to give up freedom, but only to deny it. You cannot do what God did not intend, because what he did not intend does not happen. Your gods do not bring chaos. You're endowing them with chaos and accepting it of them. All this has never been. Nothing but the laws of God have ever been, and nothing but his will ever be. You were created through his laws and by his will, and the manner of your creation established you a creator. What you have made is so unworthy of you that you could hardly want it if you were willing to see it as it is. You will see nothing at all, and your vision will automatically look beyond it to what is in you and all around you. Reality cannot break through the obstructions you interpose, but it will envelop you completely when you let them go. When you have experienced the protection of God, the making of idols becomes inconceivable. There are no strange images in the mind of God, and what is not in his mind cannot be in yours, because you are of one mind, and that mind belongs to him. It is yours because it belongs to him. For to him, ownership is sharing. And if it is so for him, it is so for you. His definitions are his laws, for by them he established the universe as what it is. No false gods you attempt to interpose between yourself and your reality affect truth at all. Peace is yours because God created you, and he created nothing else. The miracle is the act of a son of God who has laid aside all false gods and calls on his brothers to do likewise. It is an act of faith because it is the recognition that his brother can do it. It is a call to the Holy Spirit in his mind, a call that is strengthened by joining. Because the miracle worker has heard God's voice, he strengthens it in a sick brother by weakening his belief in sickness, which he does not share. The power of one mind can shine into another because all the lamps of God were lit by the same spark. It is everywhere, and it is eternal. In many, only the spark remains, for the great rays are obscured. Yet God has kept the spark alive so that the rays can never be completely forgotten. If you but see the little spark, you will learn of the greater light, for the rays are there, unseen. Perceiving the spark will heal, but knowing the light will create. Yet in returning the little light, yet in the returning, the little light must be acknowledged first, for the separation was a descent from magnitude to littleness. But the spark is still as pure as the great light, because it is the remaining call of creation. Put all your faith in it, and God himself will answer you. Ooh, I like that. That reminds me of a time when I was in a deep, deep, deep depression, really, really bad. And I was at a point where I honestly thought I was going to have a heart attack because I was having chest pain. And this has gone on for months. And I know I've shared this with a lot of you guys, but I called a friend to say, look, if something happens to me, I need you to look out for my kids because something's going on right now and I don't know what's going to happen next. And my friend said, just keep the phone to your ear for a minute. He goes, I'm going to put the phone down, but I'm going to do something. And he put his phone down and he started playing a song and he started singing me a song. And it was so amazing. I don't even remember what the name of the song was right now, but it did something. It ignited that spark inside of me. And it had been months since I had felt any light inside of me, but there was a spark and I felt it. And somehow his sharing with me, because at that moment he had temporarily had more and I temporarily had less, it ignited the spark in me, and that turned everything around. And that's when I went from life owes me to how can I be of service? And I think it's in that moment where you change just that thought of life is not fair and it owes me to how can I be of service because I have something to give to others that I need to share. It just becomes a miracle in the way you are and the way you show up and the way you interact with others and in everything about you. I think it's that place where I gotta think of the book that I have, Power versus Force, where David Hawkins has that middle point where everything above the line, your energetic frequency is going toward love, and everything below it's going toward fear. And I think I hit that middle point where now I started rising above the middle line. And it was just such an interesting time in my life. So that's my share. Anybody else have anything they want to talk about with regard to what we just read?
I think that we all have moments like that. It's being aware of them, you know, it's being aware of them. Because I think I had a moment like that too, when my son was first diagnosed with diabetes, you know, and he was 8. And I was going through a whole lot of stuff, not just that, but, you know, there was other stuff going on with my relationship with my wife at the time. And it's when I came across the book, The 4 Agreements. Believe it or not, she was reading it, or she had a copy of it actually. And I saw it and I was like, what? What's this? It was my introduction. And it came from her. And she said, you can borrow it because I'm having trouble reading it. I said, okay. And it was opened up everything for me, that book.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And that.
Have you read the other ones, Ernesto?
What's that?
Have you read the other ones, the sequels to that book?
Yes. In fact, I've read all his stuff.
Okay.
And I've also been on workshops where he's been there and with some of his apprentices. And I've traveled to some of the, I call them sacred sites with some of his apprentices.
I see.
And that has really, I mean, I can't even begin to describe the experiences that I have had. Because up until that point, I had read also, I don't know if you're familiar with Carlos Castadena's books, the Toltec books that he's written about. And even though he's not, he's responsible for having introduced the whole Toltec wisdom thing to the world, but he's not looked upon as one of the, you know, true teachers of it. But he writes about a lot of stuff that is true. And I've experienced some of those things as I've gone to some of these sacred sites, you know, where we've done some actual ritual stuff. And you come to realize that there's a lot more to this physical world we live in. If we just kind of rest and, you know, look at it honestly and truthfully, you see that there's a lot more going on than the eye perceives.
Now, when I came in today, Terry was talking about childhood experiences and being in a more or less stuck sort of place between guilt and willful self-pride, maybe, where all decisions seem to be taken over, seem to be possessed by that difficulty of seeing myself free of that. And this particular chapter, this particular section actually is, you know, reminds me of the Song of Prayer. And it reminds me of the end of the Song of Prayer is in healing in the Song of Prayer. There's this idea of the release from all that. So the idea of the release from all that, similar to the masks that are talked about with the Mastery of Self in the book by Ruiz Jr. Similar to that, there's a release of this tension, of this difficulty, and you realize it's not the same thought system. It becomes clear to you then it's not the same thought system at all. Now it's not a thought system that even deals with guilt and doesn't deal with willful self-pride. It's removed from that entirely. So that's removed from the mind in that sense. And then there's what's left for you know, contemplating decisions and having the kind of day that I want and so on and so forth. Suddenly reason begins to replace thinking, and suddenly thoughts now become external, seen as external. You know, the ideas of them. It's always difficult when I meet people to remember, you know, these are thought forms I'm looking at. Let me see beyond the thought forms, because there's behind that, there's hidden from that, there's this infinite patience. There's this reason that makes sense. There's not this difficulty in front of me here that I thought I saw. Somebody new, you know, changes that occur, so on and so forth. There's the world constantly changes. So anyway, what reminded me of that was the I guess kind of, you know, the decision for let me feel as God, let me feel as God, let me let me see as God, as peace sees. Anyway, thanks.
No, I love that, Eric. It's interesting you brought that up too, because as I was reading that, it also reminded me of a podcast I was listening to yesterday, where the speaker it was on the Heal documentary, and the speaker was talking about multiple universes and in multiple worlds, and where in all these other universes and other worlds, we are living different lives and doing different things. And I was thinking as we were reading this today, how that could be possible as you clear the lens and as you go on this journey of at-one-ment or atonement, as the Course in Miracles calls it, and you become more Christ mind, right? And you become more in that mind of seeing everyone as your brother, then the world changes, right? The world we live in changes. And maybe that's where the idea of multiple worlds comes in, you know, as you're going through this change of, you know, letting go of your ego and becoming more aligned with the one mind of God. Maybe the world literally changes that you are in, which is then why people call, you know, say that there's multiple worlds and multiple universes that you live in. It's really just your mind is changing. So the projection of your reality is changing. If we believe that the world is just a projection of our separated mind, then maybe that's how there are multiple worlds and multiple universes. As our mind changes, we are in these different projections of worlds and universes. Just
because they are truly there.
They're within the illusion of the projection, right? But it's just an interesting thought, because I think that many times people are like, well, if I let go of my ego, I'm going to die. Well, no, you're not going to die. Just the ego part of you will be less prevalent and your world will change, you know, and that might be a softer introduction to people than thinking, well, geez, if I believe all of this that I'm learning and I really let go of my ego, you know, I think the fear of death starts looming in. And when you realize there is no death, that life is eternal, that could possibly open up this idea of multiple worlds and universes that could exist, because it's another projection of a mind that is now more aligned with God's mind.
Yeah, the thought that I get is that there's really only one fear that we all have, that we seem to not be able to notice what it is. We classify them as many, right? But there's really only one, and that fear is the fear to love.
The fear to love, the fear of death, the fear of, right?
Well,
I mean,
we fear that ego is going to die, and you know, maybe he does need to die in some form.
Interesting. Well, that brings us to our next reading, which is the denial of God. So let's see what we have to read here. Okay, Course in Miracles, chapter 10, the denial of God. The rituals of the God of sickness are strange and very demanding. Joy is never permitted, for depression is the sign of allegiance to him. Depression means that you have forsworn God. Many are afraid of blasphemy, but they do not understand what it means. They do not realize that to deny God is to deny their own identity. And in this sense, the wages of sin is death. The sense is very literal. Denial of life perceives its opposite, as all forms of denial replace what is with what is not. No one can really do this, but that you think you can and believe you have is beyond dispute. Do not forget, however, that to deny God will inevitably result in projection, and you will believe that others, and not yourself, have done this to you. You must receive the message you give because it is the message you want. You may believe that you judge your brothers by the messages they give you, but you have judged them by the message you give to them. Do not attribute your denial of joy to them, or you cannot see the spark in them that would bring joy to you. It is the denial of the spark that brings depression. For whenever you see your brothers without it, you are denying God. Allegiance to the denial of God is the ego's religion. The God of sickness obviously demands the denial of health, because health is in direct opposition to its own survival. But consider what this means to you. Unless you are sick, you cannot keep the gods you made. For only in sickness could you possibly want them. Blasphemy, then, is self-destructive, not God-destructive. It means that you are willing to know yourself in order to be sick. This is the offering your God demands, because having made him out of your insanity, he is an insane idea. He has many forms, but although he may seem to be many different things, he is but one idea, the denial of God. Sickness and death seemed to enter the mind of God's Son against his will. The attack on God made his Son think he was fatherless. And out of his depression, he made the God of depression. This was his alternative to joy, because he would not accept the fact that although he was a creator, he had been created. Yet the Son is helpless without the Father, who alone is his help. I said before that of yourself you can do nothing, but you are not of yourself. If you were, what you have made would be true and you could never escape. It is because you did not make yourself that you need be troubled over nothing. Your gods are nothing because your Father did not create them. You cannot make creators who are unlike your Creator any more than he could have created a son who was unlike him. If creation is sharing, it cannot create what is unlike itself. It can share only what it is. Depression is isolation, and so it could not have been created. Son of God, you have not sinned, but you have been much mistaken. Yet this can be corrected, and God will help you, knowing that you could not sin against him. You denied him because you loved him, knowing that if you recognized your love for him, you could not deny him. Your denial of him, therefore, means that you love him and that you know he loves you. Remember that what you deny, you must have once known. If you accept denial, you can accept its undoing. Your Father has not denied you. He does not retaliate, but he does call to you to return. When you think he has not answered your call, you have not answered his. He calls to you from every part of the sonship because of his love for his Son. If you hear his message, he has answered you, and you will learn of him if you hear aright. The love of God is in everything he created, for his Son is everywhere. Look with peace upon your brothers, and God will come rushing into your heart in gratitude for your gift to him. Do not look to the God of sickness for healing, but only to the God of love, for healing is the acknowledgement of him. When you acknowledge him, you will know that he has never ceased to acknowledge you, and that in his acknowledgement of you lies your being. You are not sick, and you cannot die, but you can confuse yourself with things that do. Remember, though, that to do this is blasphemy, for it means that you are looking without love on God and his creation, from which he cannot be separated. Only the eternal can be loved, for love does not die. What is of God is his forever, and you are of God. Would he allow himself to suffer? And would he offer his Son anything that is not acceptable to him? If you will accept yourself as God created you, You will be incapable of suffering. Yet to do this, you must acknowledge him as your creator. This is not because you will be punished otherwise. It is merely because your acknowledgement of your Father is the acknowledgement of yourself as you are. Your Father created you wholly without sin, wholly without pain, and wholly without suffering of any kind. If you deny him, you bring sin, pain, and suffering into your own mind because of the power he gave it. Your mind is capable of creating worlds, but it can also deny what it creates because it is free. You do not realize how much you have denied yourself and how much God, in his love, would not have it so. Yet he would not interfere with you because he would not know his son if he were not free. To interfere with you would be to attack himself. And God is not insane. When you deny him, you are insane. Would you have him share your insanity? God will never cease to love his son, and his son will never cease to love him. That was the condition of his son's creation, fixed forever in the mind of God. To know that is sanity. To deny it is insanity. God gave himself to you in your creation, and his gifts are eternal. Would you deny yourself to him? Out of your gifts to him, the kingdom will be restored to his son. His son removed himself from his gift by refusing to accept what had been created for him, and what he had created in the name of his Father. Heaven waits for his return, for it was created as the dwelling place of God's Son. You're not at home anywhere else or in any other condition. Do not deny yourself the joy that was created for you, for the misery you have made for yourself. God has given you the means for undoing what you have made. Listen, and you will learn how to remember what you are. If God knows his children as wholly sinless, it is blasphemous to perceive them as guilty. If God knows his children as wholly without pain, it is blasphemous to perceive suffering anywhere. If God knows his children to be wholly joyous, it is blasphemous to feel depressed. All of these illusions, and the many other forms that blasphemy may take, are refusals to accept creation as it is. If God created his son perfect, that is how you must learn to see him, to learn of his reality. And as part of the sonship, that is how you must see yourself, to learn of yours. Do not perceive anything God did not create, or you are denying him. His is the only fatherhood, and it is yours only because he has given it to you. Your gifts to yourself are meaningless, but your gifts to your creations are like his, because they are given in his name. That is why your creations are as real as his. Yet the real fatherhood must be acknowledged if the real son is to be known. You believe that the sick things you have made are your real creations, because you believe that the sick images you perceive are the sons of God. Only if you accept the fatherhood of God will you have anything, because his fatherhood gave you everything. That is why to deny him is to deny yourself. Arrogance is the denial of love, because love shares and arrogance withholds. As long as both appear to you to be desirable, the concept of choice, which is not of God, will remain with you. While this is not true in eternity, it is true in time, so that while time lasts in your mind, there will be choices. Time itself is your choice. If you would remember eternity, you must look only on the eternal. If you allow yourself to become preoccupied with the temporal, you are living in time. As always, your choice is determined by what you value. Time and eternity cannot both be real because they contradict each other. If you will accept only what is timeless as real, you will begin to understand eternity and make it yours. Ooh, there was a lot in there. That brought a lot of things to my mind as I was reading it. Mhm.
So there was a sentence that said to be depressed is to be blasphemous. So is that because you're seeing your life or yourself, which is God's creation, is less than perfect?
I would say that that's a great description of that, because you're not seeing yourself as God created you. That's why they say it's blasphemous.
So if one is depressed, then what would you do? What would the exercises be?
I would say that, depression is seeing yourself without God, right? It's seeing yourself not as God created you. So the lessons are a great thing to do, because those are step by step helping you to be more aligned with the mind of God. Anytime you read A Course in Miracles, you're aligned with love. So I would say, the more you could read anything that would be in alignment with love, or listen to any type of music that's in alignment with a higher vibration, that will bring you into more of an alignment with the truth of who you are and what you are. Just like when I said, that person that I reached out to sang that song to me, that was coming from a place of love. So that share of love reminded me who I am. Even in that deep place of depression, it ignited that spark in me, and it was that spark that led to the light that led to the great rays. So it's the progression of the steps, right?
So I would imagine the same thing is true of living in fear, right? That would also be blasphemous.
Right. And don't forget too that words are but symbols of symbols. So when you're using the word blasphemous, I think the Course in Miracles uses a lot of words that biblically, resonate with a certain idea of what you think that word is. And all blasphemous means is that you're denying the truth of what you are. You're denying that you are of God, that you are pure love, perfect in every way, and that you are created in God's image as a son of God.
You can say it, that we are God. That's the whole point, I think, of this blasphemous word, where religion teaches that blasphemy is to go against God or being less than God. Here it's saying you are God, because you are not only created in his image, you are him, he's love, he's everything that you are. We are one and the same.
So when you're not thinking that, that's why Course in Miracles is saying that it's blasphemous, because you're not understanding the truth of who you are and what you are. But it's in no way meant to say you're sinning. It's not meant to put something on you that you're doing something bad or wrong.
Right. You just being in denial.
So would the same be true of negative feelings such as sadness or anger?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Because they're all in denial of the truth of what you are, that you are pure love.
Right.
The very first sentence of this, it says the denial of God. The very first sentence says, the ritual of the God of sickness are strange and very demanding. Joy is never permitted.
Mm-hmm.
There it is right there. For depression is the sign of allegiance to him. You're denying the joy in you, right? The joy, the love, everything, all of that.
So depression is a sign of allegiance to a false god? Is that what that's saying?
Right. It's a sign that you have denied your own identity, that you've
Right.
denied the truth of what you are and created a false god, right?
Right.
And it could be money or power, that new car, whatever your false god is, could be that relationship, whatever you think is going to bring you joy. That's something outside of yourself.
It's a symbol of the murdering of the Christ, of the crucifixion of him. Blasphemous is a symbol of that. So you're seeing it in chapter 13 where it discusses this. And what we're asked to do is to see things as they truly are instead. So the blasphemous is not the problem. It's that we don't see things as they truly are. That needs to be corrected. So the blasphemous is removed for us. We don't have to worry about that. What we have to do is concentrate on what truly is shown to us in that perfect, peaceful realization where blasphemy doesn't exist.
Right.
Now,
Very well
something
put.
happened to Terry when you said that your friend played that music for you. Something happened in your mind. Do you remember that, or?
I remember feeling joy in my heart for the first time, like true joy,
Mark, as you say, right?
because it came from inside of me. Whereas previous to that moment, I was looking for happiness out here in this world of illusions.
Right.
So that was the first time I felt joy inside of me. And it was like, oh, what is this? And it felt warm and beautiful and safe and loving, and everything that, I had been looking for out here, I felt was now in here.
So that's what blasphemous does, the opposite of that. Because
Right.
blasphemous causes us to look to the outside world for the solution. There is no solution in the world outside ourselves because that's what's separated from thought. Thought is separated, is symbolically represented in the world outside ourselves. Everything that's represented by our eyes, through our eyes and through our senses is all separated. All are discarded thought, disconnected and discarded, rearranged so the energy and the information of them is inconceivably, insignificantly not real.
Very well said, Eric.
Now I have that song, This Little Light of Mine, stuck in my head. Like I'm imagining that was the song they sang. to
Right.
you.
It might as well have been, right? And I don't even think
Right.
it was the words of the song that were important. I think it was the conveyance of the energy of love.
Yeah.
And that's probably why I can't remember the song, because it didn't matter.
Right.
So your friend, rather than joining you in your perceived problem, just stayed present to your reality, your truth.
And saw the Christ in
And
me.
yeah, and fanned the flame
Yeah,
so that you could feel it in a stronger way.
that's exactly what happened, which is why they always say when you look on a friend, don't see them as sick or in any way not perfect. Always see them as the Christ in them, in their perfection. And that's the best way for you to help to heal anybody. Don't join with them in their sickness, in their separation. Join with them in the united mind of love, which is the truth of who they are and what they are.
Right.
Mhm.
Any other thoughts about what we just read?
Yeah, I just want to say that a lot of the exercises that I've learned through going through these workshops with the Toltec people is about It's about experiencing love and just even giving love in terms of just in your mind, sending love that way. And it could be far away to somebody, it could be next to somebody, it could be while you're even having a conversation. That guy was berating me. That was one of the thoughts that came to my mind as well. All of that. It's always, if you just work on that love word, that is good enough, because it does work.
Yeah, you have a real good point there, because, tying it back to that experience, I don't know what happened exactly, but when we try to label and categorize, and we try to identify with what's happening like that, that's taking us away from what's real to us. That's taking us away from this thought system that is healing and energizing. It's taking us away from that. So you resisted doing that.
Right. I mean,
not only were you quiet, but you resisted doing that. You decided, you denied power to that.
Yes. I mean, yes. Yeah. It was a challenge. I can tell you that it was very challenging, because the adrenaline, it's a whole thing about fight or flight.
Yeah.
But I could do neither. I just had to stay there, listen to him, stay in my car. And I heard nothing else after that, because it was a thought process that was going on, and within that thought process, it was calmed down to the point where I could even tell in his tone as he was yelling out of the window, driving. And it made me laugh. I was in my car thinking that was a funny thing. That was funny. I think about it now, and I think about it funny. It took a while, because, that adrenaline, I mean, I had to get rid of it. I came home and I did a workout on Zoom. I get these things, and I did a workout for about an hour. I was like, you got to work that adrenaline out of you somehow, dude. It was, but it worked. I mean, and now I think back upon it, and it was like, I'm pretty proud of myself, pat myself on the back.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good job.
And we have lots of opportunities to learn, right? Because we have many, many people that are our brothers that are sent to us to learn the lessons that we need to learn.
Right.
You could even look at that experience in gratitude and say, thank you for that lesson. You're helping me.
Well, the first thing I thought about was like, and I said it out loud, I said, what am I supposed to learn from this guy? What's going on here,
What is this for?
Terry, you said this brought up a lot for you. What was it that you were thinking of after this reading?
Well, I think just in general, just a lot of, the rituals that we do that take us out of the truth of who we are, and looking at the God of sickness, and really being vigilant to not let our mind wander into those places. Being conscious of the choices we have, not only with the thoughts that we make, but conscious with, the type of environment that we put ourselves in, conscious with how we populate things that we listen to, the music, the television shows, all of the things that are at our disposal. We have choices. We have 60,000 thoughts a day. And with those thoughts, we have 60,000 choices of, where we're going to put our allegiance. Are we going to choose love, or are we going to align with fear? And aligning with fear, we might say is an unconscious act. But the more vigilant we are with watching our thoughts and being aware of where our thoughts are going, the more we are able to redirect and say, okay, I have a choice here. I can choose love or fear. What am I choosing? Today's lesson actually is lesson 270, which lines up with what we're reading today perfectly. I will not use the body's eyes today. And it talks about, Christ's vision is God's gift to me, and it has the power to translate all that the body's eyes behold into the sight of a forgiven world, right? So we have the choice to transform everything by using Christ's vision instead of the body's eyes. And it's just that conscious choice, like Ernesto said, to see the truth in our brothers, the love in our brothers, instead of the fear that they're aligned with. I thought that was interesting. Shall we keep reading, or is there more discussion on this? Okay, we're entering a new chapter, chapter 11, God or the ego, which still seems to flow right into what we have been talking about. God or the ego, chapter 11, introduction. Either God or the ego is insane. If you will examine the evidence on both sides fairly, you will realize this must be true. Neither God nor the ego proposes a partial thought system. Each is internally consistent, but they are diametrically opposed in all respects, so that partial allegiance is impossible. Remember, too, that their results are as different as their foundations, and their fundamentally irreconcilable natures cannot be reconciled by vacillations between them. Nothing alive is fatherless, for life is creation. Therefore, your decision is always an answer to the question, who is my father? And you will be faithful to the father you choose. Yet, what would you say to someone who believed this question really involves conflict? If you made the ego, how can the ego have made you? The authority problem is still the only source of conflict, because the ego was made out of a wish of God's Son to father him. The ego then is nothing more than a delusional system in which you made your own father. Make no mistake about this. It sounds insane when it is stated with perfect honesty, but the ego never looks on what it does with perfect honesty. Yet that is its insane premise, which is carefully hidden in the dark cornerstone of its thought system. And either the ego, which you made, is your father, or its whole thought system will not stand. You make by projection, but God creates by extension. The cornerstone of God's creation is you, for his thought system is light. Remember the rays that are unseen. The more you approach the center of his thought system, the clearer the light becomes. The closer you become to the foundation of the ego's thought system, the darker and more obscure becomes the way. Yet even the little spark in your mind is enough to lighten it. Bring this light fearlessly with you and bravely hold it up to the foundation of the ego's thought system. Be willing to judge it with perfect honesty. Open the dark cornerstone of terror on which it rests and bring it out into the light. There you will see that it rested on meaninglessness and that everything of which you have been afraid was based on nothing. My brother, you are part of God and part of me. When you have at last looked at the ego's foundation without shrinking, you will also have looked upon ours. I come to you from our Father to offer you everything again. Do not refuse it in order to keep a dark cornerstone hidden, for its protection will not save you. I give you the lamp, and I will go with you. You will not take this journey alone. I will lead you to your true Father, who hath need of you, as I have. Will you not answer the call of love with joy? I know that was just the introduction, but I always like to pause in case anybody has a comment. All right, let's keep going. The gifts of the fatherhood. I have a lot of things underlined in this section. You have learned your need of healing. Would you bring anything else to the sonship, recognizing your need of healing for yourself? For in this lies the beginning of the return to knowledge, the foundation on which God will help build again the thought system you share with him. Not one stone you placed upon it, but will be blessed by him, for you will be restoring the holy dwelling place of his Son, where he wills his Son to be, and where he is. In whatever part of the mind of God's Son you restore this reality, you restore it to yourself. You dwell in the mind of God with your brother, for God himself did not will to be alone. To be alone is to be separated from infinity. But how can this be if infinity has no end? No one can be beyond the limitless, because what has no limits must be everywhere. There are no beginnings and no endings in God, whose universe is himself. Can you exclude yourself from the universe, or from God, who is the universe? I and my Father are one with you, for you are part of us. Do you really believe that part of God can be missing or lost to him? If you are not part of God, his will would not be unified. Is this conceivable? Can part of his mind contain nothing? If your place in his mind cannot be filled by anyone except you, and you're filling it with your creation, without you, there would be an empty place in God's mind. Extension cannot be blocked, and it has no voids. It continues forever, however much it is denied. Your denial of its reality may arrest it in time, but not in eternity. That is why your creations have not ceased to be extended, and why so much is waiting for your return. Waiting is possible only in time, but time has no meaning. You who made delay can leave time behind simply by recognizing that neither beginnings nor endings were created by the Eternal, who placed no limits on his creation or upon those who create like him. You do not know this simply because you have tried to limit what he created, and so you believe that all creation is limited. How then can you know your creations, having denied infinity? The laws of the universe do not permit contradiction. What holds for God holds for you. If you believe you are absent from God, you will believe that he is absent from you. Infinity is meaningless without you, and you are meaningless without God. There is no end to God and his Son, for we are the universe. God is not incomplete, and he is not childless. Because he did not will to be alone, he created a Son like himself. Do not deny him his Son, for your unwillingness to accept his fatherhood has denied you yours. See his creations as his Son, for yours were created in honor of him. The universe of love does not stop because you do not see it, nor have your closed eyes lost the ability to see. Look upon the glory of his creation, and you will learn what God has kept for you. God has given you a place in his mind that is yours forever, yet you can keep it only by giving it as it was given you. Could you be alone there when it was given you because God did not will to be alone? God's mind cannot be lessened. It can only be increased, for everything he creates has the function of creating. Love does not limit, and what it creates is not limited. To give without limit is God's will for you, because only this can bring you the joy that is his and that he wills to share with you. Your love is as boundless as his because it is his. Could any part of God be without his love? And could any part of his love be contained? God is your heritage because his one gift is himself. How can you give except like him? If you would know his gift to you, give then without limit and without end to learn how much he has given you. Your ability to accept him depends on your willingness to give as he gives. Your fatherhood and your Father are one. God wills to create, and your will is his. It follows then that you will to create, since your will follows from his. And being an extension of his will, yours must be the same. Yet what you will, you do not know. This is not strange when you realize that to deny is to not know. God's will is that you are his son. By denying this, you deny your own will, and therefore do not know what it is. You must ask what God's will is in everything, because it is yours. You do not know what it is, but the Holy Spirit remembers it for you. Ask him, therefore, what God's will is for you, and he will tell you yours. It cannot be too often repeated that you do not know it. Whenever what the Holy Spirit tells you appears to be coercive, it is only because you have not recognized your will. The projection of the ego makes it appear as if God's will is outside yourself, and therefore not yours. In this interpretation, it seems possible for God's will and yours to conflict. God then may seem to demand of you what you do not want to give, and thus deprive you of what you want. Would God, who wants only your will, be capable of this? Your will is his life, and he has given to you. Even in time, you cannot live apart from him. Sleep is not death. What he created can sleep, but cannot die. Immortality is his will for his son, and his son's will for himself. God's son cannot will death for himself because his Father is life, and his son is like him. Creation is your will because it is his. You cannot be happy unless you do what you will truly, and you cannot change this because it is immutable. It is immutable by God's will and yours, for otherwise his will would not be extended. You are afraid to know God's will because you believe it is not yours. This belief is your whole sickness and your whole fear. Every symptom of sickness and fear arises here because this is the belief that makes you want not to know. Believing this, you hide in darkness, denying that the light is in you. You are asked to trust the Holy Spirit only because he speaks for you. He is the voice for God. But never forget that God did not will to be alone. He shares his will with you. He does not thrust it upon you. Always remember that what he gives, he keeps, so that nothing he gives can contradict him. You who share his life must share it to know it, for sharing is knowing. Blessed are you who learn that to hear the will of your Father is to know your own. For it is your will to be like him, whose will it is that it be so. God's will is that his Son be one and united with him in his oneness. That is why healing is the beginning of the recognition that your will is his. Dun, dun, dun. I had underlined so many things in this, and I'm looking at it now. I'm like, why did I underline that? It's so interesting, as you progress through your alignment with love, the way you perceive the world changes so much that you don't know why you used to underline things that seem meaningless now. Because back then they were like new ideas and you're like, oh my gosh, this is so interesting. And now it's like, that seems odd that I underlined that. I think it's all part of like becoming closer to that at one minute, And your world does change. My world has changed in so many ways and continues to change. And I love it. I love the expansion. Any thoughts on what we just read? Quiet group today. Everybody's just taking it all in.
Paragraph 8
Mhm.
made me feel that a stronger connection with the Holy Spirit would be important for me. And yet I don't normally feel that way. I think it's the energy that I'm in today is making, causing that to be the case. Because I don't normally feel that I am lost to the Holy Spirit.
Right. Right.
So that was a good reminder, paragraph 8.
That's great.
Asking the Holy Spirit.
Yeah, and we forget, don't we? So many times we forget to ask the Holy Spirit. That seems to be something for me that I'm, whenever I think I have a problem that needs to be solved, all I have to do is remember to give it to the Holy Spirit. I don't have to solve it. It's not mine to solve. And as soon as I think I have a problem, it means I've already aligned with fear, so I can't solve it anyway. I've already bought into the illusion. I've already aligned with the thought that I'm not perfect and that I'm not love and that I'm not complete joy. So anything I come up with as a solution is not going to be good.
Yes, very good learning here.
No. Love or fear? Irreconcilable.
So
All right.
one of the things you feel like you struggle with, or at least for me in the earthbound body, is the giving up the resistance. I mean, this class or this study group it's monumental for me to start my week off with it. And like over this weekend, I found myself like looking forward to the Monday because it was like I struggle so much within the moment, being away from other people who don't understand this mindset or have never even been exposed to this mindset, to be so ego bound that it's exhausting. It's exhausting to try to remember the bigger picture all the time, and that you're not the body and that you're the spirit, and being confused by the fact that I keep denying myself my own abilities to step into the light, to step into the power. I don't know why we were programmed backwards. It's so frustrating.
So I know that when I first started getting into Course in Miracles, I had not learned how to optimize my environment. So I was surrounded by a lot of things that pulled me easily into that direction of fear. And I feel like the more I aligned with the truth of who I am, the more I made choices, or the people no longer wanted to hang out with me that weren't in my energetic alignment, because it wasn't fun for them. I was no longer engaging with their egos, and they didn't like that. I became boring or uninteresting because I no longer shared the same interests, right? And it's not to say that I haven't stayed friends with a lot of people over the years, but my friendships have changed. And I think that holds true with relationships as well, which is probably why I've been married 5 times. I think as my energetic frequency has changed, the people that I was with became disinterested, and they're like, I don't want to be around her. That's not fun for me. And I'd be like, well, you know, we all have choices. I love you with regardless of what you want to do. And if you know, if that means you are happy over here doing this, then I'll love you over there and I'll just go over here. You know, and you stop blaming and you stop needing to make someone wrong. You just start living your truth, and then everything just kind of takes care of itself. At least that's how I found it.
But even though you may not blame someone, so the whole point with the Course in Miracles is to see everyone as whole and perfect.
Right.
But it is true, as we grow and become closer to the one mind, we do experience an energy shift, and we do grow away from those people who have a lower vibrational energy, and we attract and are attracted to people with higher vibrations. But it's kind of a conflict, or do you know what I'm saying? Like,
Well,
because in one way everybody's perfect and everybody's whole, but in another way it's like, well, these people have a lesser energy than I do, or a lower vibration than I do. You know what I mean? It's kind of a conflict in my mind.
yeah, I would say that all minds are joined, and that bodies, even though we look and seem to be separate, we're never separate, right?
Right.
We're never separated from anybody, no matter how many miles may ultimately be between our physical forms. We're always joined, right? But I think we have a choice of what we want to surround ourselves with regard to how we want to be in the world, right? And within the world of illusion. And, you know, I was in a very harmful, physically harmful relationship when I was in my late teens. And I had to make a choice to physically separate myself from that person for many reasons, but also because I ended up just enabling this person to be violent. You know, being in that relationship, I realized I enabled the violence. So I had to physically remove myself from that. It didn't mean that I didn't, you know, he was probably one of my greatest teachers, because I learned so much about loving myself. And ultimately the entire relationship since then has been healed, first through a dream and then through an actual encounter. But, you know, there's just situations that happen, I think, in our life that guide us. And if we follow that vibration of love, then I think we're always supposed to be we're always where we're supposed to be in every moment, right? That doesn't mean that we're going to stop attracting those situations into our lives, because all of our brothers are sending us those opportunities to learn and grow and to be loved. So like Ernesto, you know, Ernesto is optimizing his environment, but he pulls up to a red light and there's this person next to him screaming at him, right? Like he didn't call that in on purpose, but there was something inside of him that said, okay, I'm going to send you a guru today to help you be love in this moment of chaos, which we are reading is not the truth and is not real. It's part of the illusion because it's not of God, right? So it's all these opportunities to tell ourselves again, that's part of the illusion. I'm going to see the Christ in you. I'm going to be at that place of at one minute with your mind, that Christ mind. I'm going to see the world through Christ's vision today. And it's just an opportunity again and again and again and again through all of our relationships, all of our situations, to make that conscious choice to say, okay, today I'm going to see through Christ's vision, not through the eyes of the body.
But in this world of illusion, I'm not going to hang out with you either.
Unless
right?
you want to. I mean, there's no hard, fast rule, but I mean.
Right. But when I'm around people that are really negative and, you know, always a victim or always complaining, I feel like it brings my energy level down. So I can't be around that.
Right, right. And I feel similarly. Yeah,
Nor do
And
you want
even
to
though
be.
it's an illusion.
right.
So I
Yeah,
guess
you don't-
the key is accepting that we are living in a world of illusion. Right?
Yeah, I mean, acknowledging it, sure, acknowledging it and realizing that within this world of illusion, you have a choice. You
Right.
can align with love or you can align with fear.
Yep.
And, you know, even the Course in Miracles said the whole problem started when we started taking life too seriously and we forgot to laugh. Right? If we're conscious that we're living in a world of illusions, we can laugh and say, oh, I see what you did there. You just reminded me that I have a choice to choose love. And I'm not going to take what you're saying to me personally, because I realize that it's part of the illusion that you are aligning with fear right now, but I choose to see you as perfect and whole and as God created you.
See, I think infinity sees it as illusory. So seeing through it is illusory, like watching a magic trick in a place where you can see what happens. And the woman that disappears is suddenly there's a gap there that she moves into when she's disappearing. You don't see the gap because the angle and so on and so forth that you're shown doesn't show you where the gap is there, but she's moved into a gap. Mm-hmm. So we're always looking for this gap between the thoughts. If we're stuck in our thoughts, there's a gap between the thoughts. It's there that peacefulness is still present in our mind. So we connect with that gap in our mind where it says this isn't happening for real. This is illusory. So I still have to see it. I'm still in this world with people, but I still have to see, therefore, what people are doing, what's happening in the world. But it's not people that I'm connecting with. It's the mind I'm connecting with. The truth is never changed, and the peace is never gone, and that infinite patience is never not there for me, so long as I recognize that I don't have to think. I just return to this peacefulness. Thinking isn't going to help me out of this.
Good point.
That's good. Thanks.
Yeah, you don't have to hang out with somebody that is, if you cannot go beyond the person, going into a negative head, and you cannot come out of that because you're getting caught up in it. There's nothing that's telling you that you have to stay there. That's the way I deal with it. I have a friend that is very negative, always downhead, blah, blah, blah. And there are times when, he's lonely. I mean, I don't know that he'll ever change, because I don't even know that he wants to come out of that frame of mind. That's what he's used to doing. And, I like his friendship. I'll, hang out with him. He's got some good qualities, but when he gets into that frame, I don't have to be there. I don't have to listen to that. Obviously what I believe is not working for him. So that's his choice, and I don't see him often, but when I do see him, I know what I'm about to deal with. So, and it's good because in a sense, it lets me see what's going on. I mean, like I look at him as a brother that's teaching me, and I tell him that. I tell him straight out like that too. Whether he gets it or not, it's up to him.
And I think that's the best course of action too, Ernesto, because when I was in that relationship I was just talking about, and I was the victim, right? I played that role. I would go to a friend's house and we'd have coffee once a week, and I couldn't wait to tell her all the horrible things that this person had done to me every single week. It was like releasing such a burden off of my mind to be able to share like all these horrible things that this person did to me. And then the one day she said, you can come and have coffee with me and we can talk about all the wonderful things you want to do with your life, but we cannot talk about that. She said, it is your choice to stay in this relationship or leave this relationship. And she said, it's just too hurtful for me to hear it. And I can't hear it anymore. And I was so upset when that happened. And it almost made me unbalanced and dizzy. And I didn't know what to do because that was my release and I couldn't release it. But that was the impetus for change. And at that moment, I realized that playing the role of the victim was no longer serving me.
Yeah, Robert Perry wrote about that. The victim needs the victimizer to continue to be the victim. So I become the victimizer in order to satisfy what the victim is looking for, which is the victimizer.
Right.
It's a never-ending cycle.
Yeah.
Brenda was right to say that's enough of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when I couldn't share it with my friend so that I could be the victim, right? Because you can't be the victim unless you can share it with somebody and they're like, oh, you poor thing. When I could no longer share it with my friend, I could no longer be the victim. And I'm like, wait a minute, this isn't going to work for me. So
It's another version of how you can bring the light to somebody, right?
by no longer being their enabler. So she was no longer my enabler, and me leaving that relationship, I was no longer his enabler, right?
Exactly.
So it was
the same thing that you did when you talked about your childhood. You said you were stuck in your childhood. Did you see that the same? Is it not the same exact thing that happened?
Oh, sure. Yeah, it was the same thing. I replayed it over and over again.
Yeah.
I'm afraid and I'm not safe. Kept playing out.
It was making your victimizer
right.
Empowered the whole time to continue to make that story real to you.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's exactly what I saw by it occurred at me. So I think it was 18 months old. I'm not really sure. But suddenly at 18 months old or somewhere along the lines like that, I lost faith in my parents. And for the rest of my life, pretty much I was disconnected from my parents and didn't really want to share anything with them because of that fear of them, which never really made sense. I was incapable of really understanding it when it happened.
Right.
I just call it the birth of the ego. It's, and my victimizer mind was victimized. I didn't even remember the story even until this was healed. I didn't even know that story was there. And I didn't even see it until then. Yeah.
Same here. I had forgotten about it until I was ready to heal it.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. Well, wonderful shares. Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone, for
your
being vulnerable, asking questions, and sharing, because that's how we all learn and grow. And I appreciate all of you. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Terry. Bye, everybody. Have a great
Bye-bye.
Have a
week.
good week.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye bye.
Love your commentaries.
Mhm.